So the first thing is to reach out for help. And I think we completely underrate the power of social support. Social support, you have a mother, hopefully, you have a father, if you have sisters or brothers, you have cousins, you have aunties, you have a pastor, you have the imam, or whatever faith you subscribe to.
Yeah.
So these are structures actually in our society that are protective against going into a depressive episode. But should you find yourself in such a situation, even before you take the big step of going to see someone, you can start by telling someone within your best friend. Tell them, I don't feel well lately. And talking at that level is very helpful. But if you feel like, no, something is wrong, you can start anywhere. You can see a counselor. You can look up a crisis hotline online and call. You can go to the doctor. You can just walk into any outpatient department and tell a doctor, I'm not feeling well.
An estimated 1.1 million Kenyans fall into poverty each year. And that's because of healthcare costs. Would SHA, SHIF, UHC change that? Or is there more? Or perhaps, what's the difference between a pharmacy with a Blue Cross and a Green Cross? What about cancer and the rising incidence amongst the youth? Is it just lifestyle changes, or is there more?
Women's health, men's health, your children's health, the economy, this and more awaits you on Season 2 of Kenya's favorite health podcast.
My name is Dr. Diana Wangari Gitao, and welcome to Season 2 of the One Health Lens podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to yet another episode of One Health Lens podcast. This is the explained episode, and I want us to get into a very interesting conversation. I want us to get into depression and anxiety. These are two terminologies that are thrown around. We hear them every single day. We come across them in this day and time, but do we truly understand what they are, and how can we manage these conditions once we have them? And I'm joined here by the lovely Dr. Mudoni Karanja. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
So you're going to help us debunk this conversation, right?
Right.
Yeah. Could you tell us briefly who you are, what you do, and just introduce yourself to us?
Okay. That's always a hard question.
Yeah.
Tell us about yourself. But my name is Dr. Muthoni Karanja. So I'm a medical doctor, but I'm a psychiatrist. That's my specialization. And I'm passionate about mental health. And I work here in Nairobi in the same field. I'm a mother. And I love everything mental health.
I love that.
Yeah.
And these days I am grateful for the society we live in today, because mental health has become such a conversation in different spaces. It cuts across different workspaces, family life. All age groups are covered in this, because previously it wasn't discussed as much. But then right now we have this conversation of, I have depression, I'm dealing with depression, I'm experiencing this.
Yeah.
So could you help us understand what is depression?
Okay. That's a good question, because it's a term we throw around, and sometimes people don't really know what they mean when they're talking about depression. But depression is basically a mood disorder, which is characterized by very low mood that goes on for a long time. So it's a low mood that is there for most of the day, most days, for a period of more than 2 weeks. So if you have 2 weeks of feeling blue, and also you might have difficulty sleeping, loss of appetite, so you can sleep too much or sleep too little. You can lose your appetite, or you're eating way more than is your baseline. Excessive worry, feeling hopeless, feeling worthless, feeling like there's no hope for the future. And for some people, even having thoughts about death. Like I hear people saying unaliving yourself, or just feeling like you'd be better off dead, or the world would be better off without you. Yeah, so that's not normal. That's when you know you've crossed over from normal sadness into what could be a depressive episode. Yeah.
So it's just general low mood. And I think so many people experience that, because you can just be feeling like, I've woken up. Sometimes you call it Monday blues. And those blues can go on and on and on.
Are you blue today?
Yeah. No, fortunately, hopefully I'm red.
You don't look blue.
Yeah. So fortunately, I'm not experiencing Monday blues. But there are people who do experience that. And it is prolonged. It's not just a one-day thing, or it's not just a few minutes. So that's when you might know that you could be dealing with depression.
Exactly. There's a difference between sadness and depression. Everybody has a sad day.
Yeah.
And our mood goes up and down, you know. So sadness is like a normal human emotion.
Yeah.
But depression is now a mood disorder. And you're absolutely right. It's the time frame that makes the difference between just sadness and a depressive episode. So at least 2 weeks continuously of these symptoms that I've talked about.
Yeah.
At least maybe, let's say, 5 or more of what I've mentioned. Then now that's when the criteria is met for depression. Yeah.
And now let's get into anxiety.
Okay.
Is it similar to depression, or what is it? Because I know with anxiety, it's like you're in a panic. You feel like something is just not working. You know, the world is just horrible. Yes. Things are going down.
Yeah.
So what would you define anxiety as?
Anxiety, generally speaking, is excessive worry. Yeah. So it's when you worry. The most common one is what we call generalized anxiety disorder, which is where you don't worry about a specific thing. You worry about many things all the time. So it's, I'm going to be late for work. When I meet my boss, what am I going to say? You know, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to talk at a podcast. Oh my God, I'll have a foot in the mouth moment. You know, worrying that is excessive, and that impairs even how well you're able to function. But then there's a different kind of anxiety that comes now in waves, is what we call panic attacks, or maybe a panic disorder, which is where now, instead of that low-grade worrying about everything, you have panic attacks. Yeah.
So
you are just going about your day, and then you start developing a panic attack, which might feel like you're short of breath.
Yeah.
Your heart is beating too fast. You're sweating. You have an impending sense of doom, like something really bad is about to happen, and you don't know what. You just feel like something bad is about to happen. Your stomach is churning. You can feel the quote-unquote butterflies.
Yeah.
You might have a bit of a runny stomach. And then it starts slowly, builds up until you feel like you have this fear you'll lose control. You have this fear you'll go insane, and you might need to go, you know, to like a dark place or a quiet place to just calm yourself down. So you can have that general worry, which is worrying about everything and anything excessively.
Yeah.
And then you can have the panic attacks, and then also there's other phobias. Like you can have specific phobias, like you can be anxious in social situations. You have difficulty talking to people and interacting with people. You can have specific phobias, like you can be terribly afraid of spiders.
Yeah.
And so if you see a spider, you shut down completely.
Yeah.
You know, those are now when people say, oh, I have a phobia of lizards. I have a phobia of spiders. I have a phobia of heights, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the different kind of ways in which anxiety can present. But the most common one is the general one.
Yeah,
and
you
also
just feel
the social.
excessively worried.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, because I would never have linked a phobia to anxiety. And the truth is, those symptoms are kind of similar. When you're on top of a building and you have a fear of heights, you just start thinking about, oh my God, what if I fall? What if this happens? What if this happens? So it is linked to anxiety.
It is actually a form of anxiety. And when you experience the thing, when you come across the thing you have a phobia about, we say your flight or fight kicks in and takes over.
Okay.
So now everything else loses significance, and you're completely fixated on this thing. You feel like, oh my God, that spider will jump from the wall.
And just become like a big thing and bite me.
Get into my clothes. So now, even if you're in a situation, maybe with your boss, it won't stop you from screaming or panicking or feeling your heart is beating too fast, or that feeling like, oh my God, I'm about to die. So that is definitely anxiety.
And based on what you're saying, depression is something that's a bit more long term, and anxiety comes and goes. Is that it?
Not necessarily. So depression, yes, it's more of a long term kind of low mood. There are people who, like, if you have the generalized anxiety, unless it's managed, it just stays with you. It just stays with you. And you're right in the sense of panic attacks come and go, but also it depends. Are these panic attacks being triggered by something? Or are they just out of the blue panic attacks? So if there's a thing that is triggering your panic, let's say you're in a toxic work environment, and every time you come across this person, they're going to yell at you, no matter what whether you try your best, whether your performance indicators are on point or not. You might find that every time you're coming into work, you feel that anxiety coming up, You're like, I have this meeting at 9, and so at like 8:40, you might get a panic attack, So if you're in that work environment, the anxiety will stay.
It's
until
because
you
of
get out.
the situation that you're in.
Exactly.
It brings about the emotions.
Exactly.
And now when we're talking about that, what other situations can bring about maybe the feeling of depression or anxiety? What situations can cause these symptoms to start manifesting?
I'll start with depression. So there are two types. Let me not say types, but depression can occur without a life situation. So there is the kind of depression that runs in families. So you can look into a certain family and see there's a trend here, my cousins, my mother, my grandma. So depression can come about like that. So it's not linked to a situation. But situations that can trigger a depressive episode are like grief. So you could lose a loved one. Major losses, like if you were to be retrenched suddenly. If you are in a bad situation, for example, like you're in an abusive marriage, for example, that can trigger a depressive episode. Any traumatic life event that happens, job loss, incarceration, if you are to be jailed today, going through a divorce, being in an abusive situation, war, if the country was to plunge into war, it can trigger a depressive episode. Same to anxiety. If you go through a traumatic event, if you're assaulted, if you live through a burglary, you might find that when night falls, you can't help but have that sinking feeling like something bad is about to happen. So basically, it's any traumatic event that happens to you and the way we store that memory in our body. So if it is not managed, because it's not to say bad things won't happen, but we'll talk about later the way in which if you see a bad situation, there are things you can do to ensure that you don't degenerate into a depressive episode or some kind of an anxiety disorder.
And I think when you talk about that, recently in Kenya we were having protests from June and July, and so many people were expressing how those events were draining to them. They had to check out of social media and just maybe find a way to get back to themselves, because it was a very low period in our history. And when you think about all the deaths, all the murder, all the violence, the abductions, it can trigger a depressive episode. It can trigger anxiety. You walk into town and you think about tear gas being shot, seeing people run around you like, oh my God, what is going to happen? Especially
if you work in CBD.
I'm telling you, within the building, I couldn't figure out how my editors were still working through the tear gas and everything, because I could just hear something pop and I'm like, oh my God, is that an explosion? Is that a bullet?
That is a perfect real life example.
So I'm wondering, these are things that are triggered by situations. They're triggered by moments in time. And there's also something that I've come across where mothers after getting a child, they can go through postpartum depression.
Yes.
So is that hormonal, or is it just because of the situation? What triggers depression like that in a situation like that?
That's a very good question, because that is a type of depression where it's called postpartum depression. And a lot of scientists talk about different things, but from how I view it, it's a mix of both. You've gone through a major transition. For example, you have the hormonal changes.
Yeah.
You know, the pregnancy hormones are ending, the breastfeeding ones are starting, and then you're sleep deprived, because if there's something babies are good at, it's keeping you up.
Yeah.
If you have a partner, you're also going through a transition with your partner, because it was just the two of you, and now there's this little human being.
Yeah.
And so when you combine all those things, let me say in the first 2 weeks, a large percentage of mothers will experience baby blues, which is normal. So you might feel like, I've just gotten a baby, I'm supposed to be happy, I'm supposed to be bonding with the baby.
Yeah.
But you might find you feel so sad, you're crying a lot, you feel anxious, you just don't feel like yourself.
Yeah.
But that should resolve within 2 weeks. By the 2-week mark from when the baby was born, you should be able to kind of come back to yourself.
Yeah.
But if you have sadness and, you know, being very teary, being worried something bad will happen to the baby, or even having thoughts, bad thoughts about harming the baby,
Yeah.
that go beyond 2 weeks, then now you definitely need to see someone. And that's when now you can be diagnosed with postpartum depression. And it's a very common thing that happens. And it comes particularly with a lot of guilt. Because, you know, we are conditioned as women that childbirth is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's
having
an
a baby
that's lovely.
Yeah,
and you've brought
bond.
life into this earth.
You know,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But there's a common thing I hear people saying that I really relate to, even in my own experience. When a child is born, a mother is also born. So you've never been a mother.
It's your first time.
It's your first time. And even if you have children, for example, I have 3 children, each child is different. I felt like a different mother with each child that I got. So you've never been a parent to this particular baby.
Yeah.
The way they sleep or don't sleep, you know, that kind of thing. So motherhood is a huge transition. But let me also say, even fathers get affected.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Because are men affected by postpartum depression?
Absolutely.
Or are they? Because I know they might experience depression in other situations. But how does it manifest for them in that situation?
I won't call it postpartum because, I mean, the term means you have to have
like
given
the
birth to
postpartum
a
and
child.
everything. Yeah.
But being a parent in the first year of a child's life predisposes you to a depressive episode, because it's a period of high demand. So if you put yourself in the shoes of a new dad, you had a wife, you have to take care of her, or whatever situation.
Yeah.
You had to take care of her through the entire pregnancy. The delivery came, you had bills to pay, you had to shuffle back and forth, you know, and then you get 2 weeks off.
Which is not long enough.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it makes no sense at all.
It makes no sense. So mommy is here crying, baby is crying, everybody, you have thousands of relatives visiting you.
Yeah.
And then someone is like, okay, pull yourself by the bootstraps, Rudi Kazi. So you go back to work, you're sleep deprived. This baby is high needs. You're worried about this mother that you have left at home, you know. And then you live in Nairobi, so probably you don't have the family support. You know, your mother can't come to your house, or her mother can't come.
Yeah.
So in the first year of life, a significant number of fathers will actually go into a depressive episode, which is still the same. Low mood, you're irritable, you feel hopeless, you feel like this will never end. The same things we talked about: disturbance of sleep, disturbance of appetite. And now in men, you can start to see them leaning more on substances. So you might prefer to go have a drink rather than come home and deal with all this.
Yeah.
So now you might get an addiction on top of everything that you're going through. I don't know
but
if
now
that
how
makes
do
sense.
it does. It
Yeah.
actually makes a lot of sense, because I think we see that. you see a lot of men avoiding going home directly because they're probably avoiding the responsibility. Factoring in they've come from the office and there's high demand for you to perform at work.
Yes.
And when you go back home, you're still expected. You're the man of the house. You're supposed to provide. You're supposed to have everything in order, So that can be a coping mechanism.
It can be. And I think it's difficult for each gender to see the other side, the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
Because as a mother, you've been home all day. You've not had a break. You've not talked to any adult.
Yeah.
You've not even had a hot cup of tea.
Yeah.
Because
just tending to the baby.
So you want, when this guy walks through the door, take your baby.
Yeah.
I need to take a nap.
Yeah.
But this guy has been emails, work, traffic, getting home. He just wants to take a breath.
Just
Mommy
breathe
is
for like 30 minutes.
Take this baby. You can see how that can be a pressure cooker situation.
It can.
Yeah.
And you see that can cause conflict in the home space. Now I'm wondering, what are healthy ways to manage these situations? Because the minute I realize I have been low for 2 weeks, my appetite is short, I can't sleep, or I'm sleeping too much, or because there are those times when you feel like my mood is not there, there's something that's off. How can you manage that in a healthy way?
Okay, so that brings us to the conversation of how do you treat depression and even anxiety. So the first thing is to reach out for help. And I think we completely underrate the power of social support.
Yeah.
Social support, you have a mother, hopefully, you have a father, if you have sisters or brothers, you have cousins, you have aunties, you have a pastor, you have the imam, or whatever faith you subscribe to.
Yeah.
So these are structures actually in our society that are protective against going into a depressive episode. But should you find yourself in such a situation, even before you take the big step of going to see someone, you can start by telling someone within your best friend. Tell them, I don't feel well lately. And talking at that level is very helpful. But if you feel like, no, something is wrong, you can start anywhere. You can see a counselor. You can look up a crisis hotline online and call.
Yeah.
You can go to the doctor. You can just walk into any outpatient department and tell a doctor, I'm not feeling well. This and this and this has been happening. And then they'll be able to refer you to the next place where you need to go. Yeah.
And it's also very dependent on the level which you're experiencing, whatever, if it's depression or anxiety. Then there are times when you can just talk to someone and it's okay.
Yes.
But there are times when you may need to take medication for it.
Absolutely.
So it's directed by the doctor. Once you see a psychiatrist, then they can guide you and tell you this is what you need to do.
Not even only a psychiatrist, because we work in very close relation to psychologists.
Yeah.
So wherever you start, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and even a general doctor should be able to say whether you have mild depression or anxiety, moderate or severe. So for the mild cases, you will go for psychotherapy, which is just talk therapy.
Yeah.
For the moderate to severe cases, then you'll need some medication along with the therapy. So if you had started at the psychologist, they'll say, no, this one needs medication. So they'll refer you to a psychiatrist who will start the medication process and now work hand in hand with the psychologist. So you're doing the talk therapy, I'm giving you dawas and making sure that the medication is working. Yeah.
And that's so fascinating, because then it means that you can even just get cured just by talking, just by socializing, just by sharing that this is what I'm experiencing, my fear is rooted in this, and such and such. But when we're talking about anxiety, you said it's very dependent on certain events. It's linked mostly to traumatic events or contexts that you're going into. If it's the workspace, if it's your home life, if it's even a relationship that you're in, could bring about anxiety. How do you deal with that then? Let's say the example that we've given, what we experienced in Kenya, and there are people who might feel anxious about coming back to town. They might feel anxious about seeing the police. How do you deal with situations like that?
I will say, first of all, before I even go into that, you mentioned that this was the starting point for a lot of people with depressive symptoms and anxiety. But
Yeah.
what we overlooked also was the fact that many people who had pre-existing depression and anxiety, which
Yeah.
was under control, were triggered back into
that state.
that state. So maybe you were in remission,
Yeah.
but then because of this unrest that is happening, you get a lot of people relapsed into illnesses that were previously under control.
Yeah.
However, talking is important. So there are different forms of therapies. There are group therapies, there is individual therapy. And also if it has gone beyond the cutoff is, am I able to function or not?
Yeah.
You see, you need to go to work. If between your home and your workplace there is a police station or a roadblock
Yeah.
where there will be police who have guns, you have to go to work.
Yeah.
You know, so if you are finding that you'd rather not go to work, or you won't go to church, or you're avoiding so much to the extent it's interfering with your life, it's time to see a doctor. You know, it's time to talk to someone. That's what I would say. But if it is not interfering with your work, it just gives you a bit of anxiety. There are many things. You can even start on YouTube looking for breathing exercises or anxiety meditations, which allow you to just bring that anxiety under control. Yeah.
So there are so many resources, and then fortunately we are living in a digital space where, as you said, there are hotlines, there's this doctors who are online. You can just download an app and speak to someone and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
So the resources are available, readily available.
Yes.
So we just need to find the right resources. We just need to find the right channels in which we can deal with the situations. Yeah. So as we wind up the conversation, maybe what's a parting shot you can give to whoever is listening? What would you say to them right now?
I think for me, the biggest thing I would like to say is that depression and anxiety are not a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
Or a lack of willpower.
Yeah.
It can happen to anybody.
True.
You can be a military general, you can be a pilot, you can be a stay-at-home mom, you can be a doctor.
Yeah.
You can be in media. So it is not a reason to be ashamed. It is not a sign of weakness. It is an illness like any other.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing for me, because the stigma that is associated with depression and anxiety leads people to say, just snap out of it.
Yeah.
You know,
it's not that
you're
easy.
like, geez, I didn't think of that.
Wow. If only I had that
If only
idea.
I could snap out of it, you know.
Yeah.
So it's not a sign of weakness. It can happen to anyone. Just ask for help.
Yeah.
And depression and anxiety are treatable.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really love that, because especially the fact that people tend to think, what do you mean? Especially for men.
Yeah.
Men are expected to just have everything in check.
Exactly.
Having depression and anxiety does not mean you're weak. It just means you're human.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Seek for help. If you don't want to talk to your friends, if you don't want to talk to anyone, just go on the internet and get the right help. And I think that's the best place to end this conversation.
I think so too.
Yeah, so I hope you have enjoyed listening to this as well. I hope you've gotten some gems from this conversation. Dr. Mudoni Karanja has shared some very, very important ideas and details about how we can deal with depression, what it is, and what we can expect from it. So if you're experiencing any of the symptoms, find resources within your environment that can help you get out of that state. And we are here for you. You can reach out to us as well. Dr. Mudoni, I don't know where we can find you from here.
On my socials, I go by Mudoni Karanja.
Yeah.
You can find me there, DM.
Yeah.
You can start from there. But more importantly, it's just to reiterate that you can, any doctor, you walk into any of these outpatients you see, you don't have to struggle to reach me only.
True.
There are resources right where you are.
That's
the local
true.
dispensary,
Yeah.
the nurse who does baby immunizations, they're trained
Yeah.
to
I
spot
really love
such
that.
things. Yeah.
So the resources are available for you, and I believe we'll wind up that conversation here. My name is Sheryl Blessing, and this is the One Health Lens Explained podcast. Thank you so much and have a lovely day ahead.